Oh, shadows! What? I don't know! Took it! Heart! Heart! Get up! Heart is gone! What? Heart is gone! Oh, fuck. What can I do? I gotta...
Hey everybody, welcome back to Mask of the Slasher. This week we're going to be covering 2017's The Ritual. This was a Netflix exclusive. Woo! Anyway, yeah, it's an exclusive. This was directed by David Bruckner,
who you might know from VHS. He did a bunch of different segments for the various VHS films, most notably Amateur Night in the first one. He also directed a movie called The Night House. It's very good, and if you haven't seen that, you should check it out. I'm assuming we'll do an episode on that eventually, but yeah. So he's pretty fairly well-known director in the horror genre.
Yeah. And he did a great job with this movie.
Yes.
This one we watched a while ago, and you know, I like the culty-ish kind of stuff, you know,
folklore, if you will.
Yeah, folky, Colty McCulterson. Yeah. So yeah, that's why we decided to cover it again. Plus, you know, it's still chilly out. This movie's kind of chilly.
Movie.
It is a cold movie.
Cold one.
Cold and wet.
Yeah.
Just like Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
So. This movie starts off just a bunch of bros. It's 5 guys that knew each other from college. Mm-hmm. They're sitting around at a pub just shooting the shit, and they start talking about what their next dude trip will be. They decide to leave the pub, and Robert and Luke, they decide to go into a liquor store. They're just talking back and forth about, you know, what they want to do on this trip. Most of the guys really just want to do something low-key. A lot of them were talking about, like, Amsterdam. Somebody threw out Belgium, and they're like, what's in Belgium, you know? Freaking waffles. Yeah. Robert in particular would really like to go to Sweden. He wants to go hiking. Hiking with friends always sounds kind of cool. It's not. We see that time and again in movies. Blair Witch.
Yep.
Deliverance. Things don't ever work out how they're supposed to, you know. And it's always this particular group. There's the one bro who knows everything.
Yeah.
You know, he was a Cub Scout or some shit,
Right.
you know. There's the guy who's just kind of a puffy bastard who doesn't really want to do anything.
Right.
He just wants to chill. There's the one who's pretty hesitant about everything and just, you know. So there's always that combination of people that it's like, why did they put these people together? But that's what makes a great movie, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they're in the liquor store, they're discussing this, and they're just kind of into themselves in this conversation, and suddenly Luke looks over and he sees by the back office door that there is a woman sitting there in the corner cowering, and she looks like she's been beat to shit.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the door flies open and these 2 robbers come out with the store owner, manager, whoever he is, demanding more money or whatever. And Luke just quietly creeps backwards and goes behind an end cap. If anybody doesn't know what an end cap is, it's the end of an aisle.
Yep.
If you've worked in retail or grocery stores, you know what an end cap is.
Yep.
So anyway, he goes back behind the end cap, and his friend Robert's just standing there just like dumbfounded, doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And the robbers start begging him for his shit too. And Robert wants to argue with them about giving up his wedding ring.
Yep.
Now, obviously, his marriage is very sacred to him. You know, they know that he's a great family guy, but just give it up.
Yeah, sorry, babe, I love you.
Yeah.
But if anybody was ever holding me hostage or anything and wanted this, they're getting it.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not in here, you know? You're right there, you're not in here.
That's it's not worth much either.
Yeah, it's not worth my life.
Yeah. So, anyway, poor Robert gets hit over the head and killed.
Yeah.
And in a brutal way. That was, I was rewatching everything today, and that was probably one of the more convincing fake hits in a movie, because he just flew and just, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was a machete or if it was a...
Looked like a crowbar to me.
Okay.
But
I was like, gee, because it just whipped his face right. Oh, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he falls on the floor and he dies.
Yes. So we fast forward to 6 months later, and the remaining friends are out in Sweden hiking, sort of to honor Robert. We see them wake up from their tents. They all seem very haggard and kind of reluctant to be there, but they're doing this to honor their friend.
Camping is not comfortable.
No.
Especially in tiny little pup tents, it's not comfortable, and it's cold and damp. Blech.
Yeah. So,
anyway.
So they set up a little memorial for him, they pour one out for him and everything and put a picture of him and stuff like that. And then they sort of start to continue on their merry way. Obviously, all of them are kind of inexperienced, with the exception of Hutch, who seems to kind of know what he's doing, more so than the others, at least, if nothing
The
else.
Boy Scout.
Yeah, exactly.
The one that has a compass.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, he somewhat knows what he's doing,
Yeah.
at least. At that point, Dom, who's kind of the wimp of the group, he steps into a hole, twists his knee, and falls over, and it's pretty gnarly. They decide at that point, they're trying to save time now that he's injured. They want to get where they're going as quickly as possible. So they decide to cut through a forest that they come across, in hopes of getting there quicker than staying on the trail. And one thing we've learned is you never deviate from the trail.
Ever. Ever. It doesn't. And this, you know what, this is actually a real thing that happens with people. They go off and they go hiking by themselves. Never do that.
Also, never hike alone.
Yeah, that's dumb. But when you deviate, that's it.
Yep.
Don't think that you're all, freaking Grizzly Adams and you can just go and do whatever you want. And it's not going to happen.
That's right.
But yeah, they start down the hill and go into the forest reluctantly. But because Dom's a big weenie and, his knee's getting all gross.
Yeah.
They're like, we have no choice.
Yeah.
We have no choice. But right before they get to the forest, there's a VW bus that is buried under some branches and some bullshit. And that's never a good sign.
Right.
Anytime you've ever seen a horror movie and there's old vehicles buried somewhere, especially where it was.
Exactly.
At the edge of a forest.
Yeah, red flag.
Yeah. And also, what kind of dicks just drove down the hill like that?
Yeah, exactly. How'd that car get there to begin with? They're out in the middle of nowhere.
Damn hippies. But that also gives you the idea of how long ago that was, because that's supposedly, going to be the 60s or 70s that, that happened. And so once they get down into the forest, Dom, the weenie, he has to pull over and rest, and the guys are getting annoyed because, this trip to a lodge, which is where they're going, because they're all pampered pets, it should have only taken maybe a day and a half to get there. And by them having to already go down through the forest and whatever, it's supposedly going to cut off some of this time. But if you keep stopping, obviously, this is why I'm not a good hiking partner.
Right, exactly.
Because I'll just keep stopping, and then I'll say, I'm done. But anyway, so he wants to stop and take, rest, and they take a group photo together. Once again, anytime there's a group photo, some shit's going to hit the fan with that group. And as they go deeper into the forest, they see one of the most shocking things. And it is an elk that is impaled, hanging up high in the trees, gutted, just shit just hanging out of him. And they're just like, oh, damn it. This isn't going to be good.
Right.
As soon as they see the elk in the tree, then they look down and they start to see ancient symbols that are carved into the trees. And these are symbols from runes. Once again, there goes that word, runes.
Yep.
But none of these guys really know what that means. They're just kind of like, of course the animal being in the bushes, of course the animal being in the trees is going to be shocking.
Right.
But they're still trying to just, it's no big deal.
Exactly.
It must have been a bear. Throw it up in the tree. Because that totally happens.
Oh, yeah, all the time. It was a cocaine bear, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. There's an elk in the damn tree again. Oh, shit. So anyway, they're like, oh, shit. Okay, so storm starts.
Yes.
Also, why?
Yeah.
Every time somebody is out. I have been camping one time where it just dumped rain. And we all had to go hide. And it was a Girl Scout camp out, okay? But it was Santa Cruz Mountain, so it was a little weird to have this happen. You see this cabin in the distance.
Never good when you see the dilapidated cabin.
Never. It's never a good sign.
Red flags keep piling up.
Yes, exactly. This movie should just be called Red Flags in Sweden. But so they get to this cabin and they have to break in. Also another sign of don't go in there. But they break in. But just before, Luke is the last one to go in, and he starts hearing some animalistic sounds. Yeah. Some howls, some shit you don't want around you.
Yeah, something you don't want to hear when you're out in the middle.
Just like, nah, son. Yeah. But, reluctantly goes into the cabin, because what else are you going to do, And they could see that, it looks like the cabin's been abandoned, whatever. But usually an old abandoned cabin, it's not going to be locked. So that's a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
But whatever, they don't give a shit. And so they start breaking things and trying to find things to burn in this oven that's in there. And Phil, unfortunately, he is the closest to the stairs to go up to this attic space.
Yeah.
And he goes up there. He's not thrilled about the situation. And he comes across like a closet type thing. And in that closet is something very familiar. If you've ever seen The Wicker Man, is in fact a wicker man. That's what it looks like. It's it's a man-like figure, except he's missing his head.
Yeah.
And he's got antlers for arms and hands.
Yep.
But he has human hands that are just all rotted away 4 feet.
Yeah.
And that's just freaky.
Yeah.
That was freaky. I had to rewatch it to see it again because it was like, what the shit was that? I was like, are they hooves? Are they? Nope, they're hands like splayed out, and it gross. Anyway, he calls everybody up, and everyone's like, oh shit, you know, and they're like, well, that's witchcraft, you know, and who cares? Let's go back down and go to sleep, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, what else were they going to do at that point? They're lost in the middle of the forest. It's the only shelter that there is other than their freaking tents. So, I mean...
Could have broke down that wicker man and put him in the fire.
Burned the wicker man.
He would have been perfect.
Might not have been a terrible idea.
No, maybe all this would have been okay. But anyway, so they go to sleep that night. Everybody, unfortunately, has some shit dreams.
Yes.
Some really vivid dreams. Now, of course, Luke has been carrying around this guilt about Robert dying and that he didn't step out and try to prevent anything at all. He just kind of pussed out and hid in the corner.
Yeah.
So his dream is always going to be something along the lines of he's in the liquor store again, but it changes into the forest. What's weird about this is that there's, you know, it's a thunderstorm outside, so there's lightning, and suddenly the lightning just freezes. And then he is like, what the hell is that? And goes outside, and then he's in the liquor store.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought that was clever that they did it this way. I've never seen anybody do that where they freeze the lightning, you know. It's kind of cool.
It was cool.
But anyway, so he's in the liquor store and he sees the men come in again and it's kind of replaying. Suddenly all the shelves just kind of blow away and whatever. And then he is woken up by screaming. The screaming is coming from Hutch, who is still in his sleeping bag, but he's in a dream state. So Luke wakes him up and Hutch has pissed himself.
Yeah.
And then they see Dom over in the corner, but he's just laying there in his underwear and a t-shirt. Obviously he's going to be freezing.
Yeah.
And you could see how bad his knee is at this point. It's almost his whole leg is just black and blue. It's disgusting. But he keeps calling his wife's name in this, which was really interesting and foreboding in a sense. So they wake him up out of it, and then they go upstairs to find Phil, who is naked and kneeling in front of the, I don't know what you want to call it. It's not a wicker man per se, but it's an altar. We'll just go with that. He was kneeling in front of that. It looked like he was praying. They wake him up out of it, and he's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
How did I get here? Why is this happening? And he really doesn't let it go. They all quickly get dressed, and they just want to get out of there.
Yeah.
And then Luke says, maybe we should go back.
Yeah, go back to the path.
Yeah, let's just go back. And Hutch is like, no, then we're going to lose time, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm, a Boy Scout. So once outside of the cabin, they look around. It's daylight now, and they can see in all the trees surrounding them, those rune symbols are carved into them, various types. And so then they're like, oh, shit, this isn't good.
Yeah, and there's 2 specific runes that we see over and over again throughout this movie. And the first one's the one that looks like this, and hopefully Krista can put a picture of it.
No, I'm going to leave it like that.
So it looks like that, and that's called Algiz, and it's the literal translation is elk. But it's a rune that's associated with defense and protection. The other one we see is called Odal, and I'm not going to make a hand symbol with this.
It's like this.
But it has a few different names. I know it as Odal, and it basically is associated with heritage and ancestral lands. So and those are the 2 that keep popping up over and over again throughout this movie.
Dom happens to see a very obvious trail, and they decide to follow it. Which, once again, red flag. This, like I said, red flags in Sweden.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the name of this video. It's red flags in Sweden.
It should be.
Yes. As they're, walking down this path, Phil just keeps going, what was that? Why was that? Nobody wants to talk about it. And because it's just better to not, relive it.
Right.
And, but he, of course you're going to want to know why, But they're just like, just shut up, Phil. Just shut up. Let's just not talk about this. If you don't talk about it, it's not real.
Right.
But anyway, so they see another cabin. This time they were smart, though, and decided to not go towards that cabin. Hutch sees that there's a ridge up ahead, and so Luke goes to climb it to see how far they are, because you should be able to see the cabin from wherever they are. Right. To see, okay, it's going to be another day or so, maybe. But he knows that they're not that close.
Right.
That they've got a while until they're going to be there. And, that, of course, just is like, shit, I knew we should have turned around, but no, these guys don't want to listen to me.
Yep.
But anyway, once he comes back down and he tells everybody how disappointed he is, then he shows them this wound that was on his chest. And it looks like a hand had touched him in a circular manner, and it was all bloody and gross. And it had actually happened during that dream.
Right.
But he didn't really pay much attention to it at the time because, you know, you just want to get the hell out.
Too busy being freaked out with everybody else.
Yeah. Seeing a liquor store in the middle of the forest.
Exactly.
You know, can't even get a beverage, though. But they come across yet another big fucking red flag. And that would be a tent that was torn up and somewhat buried under some, you know, sticks and shit.
Yeah.
And in that tent was a wallet. And the wallet was a credit card that expired in the 1980s.
Right.
So we've gone from like the 60s, 70s to the 80s now. So obviously this shit's going to keep happening, you know. They reluctantly set up camp for the night, and they're kind of just assessing their wounds because Phil was an idiot. He bought new boots before this. But he's like, oh, but they have memory foam in them. And he's like, yeah, but they're not broken in.
Right.
So his feet are fucked. And then, of course, you have Dom's horrible knee.
Yep.
And everybody's just, you know, just dead. They just wanted this to be over with at this point. And so they all go to sleep, and Luke continues to have these very vivid dreams about the liquor store, and they just keep progressing each dream. But suddenly, he kind of wakes up screaming and hears screaming. So Luke looks outside of his tent, and which I would never do, by the way. I'd be like, nope, if I put my head out there, something's going to happen.
Right.
But he looks out, and you can see that Hutch's tent has been ripped apart on the top, and he's missing, of course. And Luke jumps out of his tent, and he sees Phil once again in the praying position in the middle of the tents. And Dom just doesn't even wake up to any of this, which is weird. But so they have to wake him up, and it startles him, and they start to hear Hutch's screams. So they run after and try to find him, and they were like, you know, if we keep doing this, we're going to get lost and not be able to find our campground, and inevitably that's what happens. But they start to hear it again, and then they find poor Hutchie up in the trees, just like the elk was.
Yes.
So gutted, impaled, the whole nine there. And I thought those were strange. They didn't show it, but they got him down from those trees. I'd like to know how.
Yeah,
They don't really talk about it, but, you know, whatever. So he's down on the ground, and they're just trying to get things off of him that could be usable. His knife and maybe his stupid compass.
I think,
And the map was still in the tent.
Yeah.
So, you know, okay. So, yeah, they take that stuff off of him, and they decide to bury him under some leaves and shit. And they see a stream. And the stream has some human footprints in it.
Right.
And those footprints lead right to yet another cabin. I don't know if this is an HOA or what's going on here. How there's so many little tiny cabins throughout this entire forest. What they're using them for, because obviously these people are not there.
Right.
But they're like, nope, go the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So they decide to go the complete opposite direction of what's happening. As they're walking along, Phil starts to hear some shit. And suddenly he's just ripped away.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, shit, you know. And Dom goes and runs and hides in some little bush area or whatever. And Luke thankfully finds him. And they said, you know, okay, we're going to have to make a run for it. And, you know, Dom, you lazy piece of shit, can you get yourself together so we could do this? Yeah. And basically they aren't running. They're speed walking.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, that's not going to work very well.
Right.
And they start to see another path again, and there's these little tiny log torch things that are on the ground. And so they start following those, and then they're just knocked out, and they wake up inside the basement of a cabin. And they're essentially shackled to the ground with like a rope situation and whatever. And of course, completely bewildered.
Yes. They're tied up in this basement room or whatever it is, and these villagers or what have you, they come in, they give Luke water, but not Dom. And this old woman that's with them shows Luke the wound on her chest, which is the exact same as what he has.
Yeah. And then they take away Dom and take him just upstairs.
Yeah.
And you think that he's going to be killed, but he's just getting beat to shit.
They just beat the crap out of him, apparently.
Yeah. And I don't know what
I don't know the reason for that.
Yeah, just for the fun of it, I guess. Yeah. So while Dom's being beat to shit upstairs, a younger woman comes in, and she starts to give Luke some food and, you know, is talking to Luke about preparing him for a sacrifice. And just then Don is brought back down.
Right.
And so we know he's still alive. But then he's immediately dragged right back outside, and he is put on a post as the sacrifice for this beast that we have yet to see.
Right.
So Luke can actually see through the cracks in the cabin walls. He had moved some dirt away from it, so he can kind of see what's happening. And Dom he's stupid, and he's like taunting, you know, like, come on guys, let's go, you know. And it's like, bro, shut up.
Yeah.
The beast plucks him off of this pole, takes him, and kind of fucks around with him, and then impales him onto a tree. And it's like, There's my new Christmas ornament.
Yeah.
I got a new people up in the tree.
Yeah. And the post, it should be noted, is shaped like the elk rune that keeps popping up over and over again.
Yes.
As well.
It's not a maypole.
Yeah, not a maypole.
It's nothing fun happening with that pole at all.
So at this point, Dom has been killed,
Yeah.
and Luke is still there in the cabin. He starts to try to loosen his restraints. He actually ends up dislocating his thumb to get out of them, and he does manage to kind of wiggle his way out of his restraints. But at that point, the younger woman comes back in, so he kind of hides his arms back behind his back, like to not be able to see what he's done. She gives him some food. And at that point, they're kind of talking about what this creature is, and she explains that it is a Jotun. And Jotun is actually a part of Norse mythology. Here's where they took a little bit of liberties, though, because they refer to it as the bastard offspring of Loki. Well, Loki did have offspring, and he did bang a Jotun. but he didn't, not that I'm aware of that he actually, any of his children were actually Jotun. Basically what they are is, in Norse mythology, they're kind of like trolls, whereas this is almost more like an animal god or something like along those lines, you know.
Okay.
And Norse mythology gets very convoluted. So I won't go too deep into it, but just so you have an idea, there is at least a little bit of basis in actual mythology here. They're not just completely taking liberties like some of the other movies we've watched.
You mean like, what was that one?
Lord of Misrule?
Yeah, like Lord of Misrule.
Whereas Dom was a sacrifice, Luke has been actually chosen to be part of their cult or whatever this may be, as symbolized by the wound on his chest. And she explains that this creature, this Jotun, is a god that they worship, and in return for the sacrifices, it prolongs their lives, and they don't ever die. They're essentially immortal.
And they have no sorrow.
Right, and they have all their sorrows taken away.
I don't know how sorrowless they could be living in dirt cabins and having to live in fear all the time of this thing. It really doesn't seem like a good lifestyle to have.
No.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't need to. No.
Yep. So after she leaves, he full on escapes at this point. He already has loosened his bonds. He starts to kind of explore the cabin that they're in. So he finds all these what appear to be corpses propped up on benches, but then one of them starts to move and make noise, and he realizes that these things are alive. And what it appears to be is that, great, these people, they have no sorrow, they live longer, they don't ever die. But eventually that's what they become, is these husks.
Yeah. They're weird looking.
Yeah.
They're weird.
So,
and he sets them on fire.
Yeah, which I think is doing him a favor.
Yeah. Do you remember in 7, the dude that was barely kept alive, and they had all the little pine trees hanging everywhere? That's what I thought of.
Yep,
I'm like,
exactly.
they gotta be stinky.
Yep.
Just rotten flesh.
Yeah.
Anyway, he finds a gun. He goes downstairs. And that woman, unfortunately, is taken by this beast thing.
Yeah.
And you can just kind of see his legs from the door because he's so tall.
Yeah.
That's all you see out of him. So Luke runs out of the cabin, and this thing is holding that woman by her head.
Yeah.
And Luke shoots him, and it doesn't do shit.
Yeah.
It doesn't faze him. He's just pissed, more than anything. And you can tell that the beast is upset.
Yes.
Not just in I'm angry upset, but he's now starting to feel that grief and sorrow that they're trying to fight off so much. But anyway, and Luke looks, and there's these fluorescent lights, just like in the liquor store, saying, this is the way to go.
Right.
So he starts running. He had picked up an axe somewhere along the way, which starts reminding me of like first shooter games where you pick up different tools, But anyway, so he picked up this old-ass axe, and this beast goes after him and just kind of knocks him down first. It's like he's fucking with him.
Yeah. So the creature is trying to force him to kneel at this point, essentially. He's trying to force Luke to submit. Luke's not having any of it.
Yeah.
Luke keeps getting up. The creature keeps, kind of pushing him down, pushing his face down in the mud and stuff like that. But at one point, he gets up, and the creature, again, gets in his face, and Luke has this axe. He buries it right in his forehead, essentially, and creature, that actually seems to cause some pain.
Yeah.
At that point, the creature's kind of startled. I think part of it's probably pain, and part of it's not expecting that anybody's going to stand up to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so at that point, Luke is able to flee. He makes it to the outskirts of the forest, and it appears that the creature either won't or can't.
I don't think he can go past the forest. And, the beast is screaming because, once again, he's feeling that sorrow. And Luke is also feeling that because he's realizing all of his friends are gone now. And all of this would have been prevented if he had just stood up for his friend in the liquor store. So they basically have this sorrowful screaming match. And it's really sad to watch because you can just feel how heartbroken they both are.
Right.
Because this beast wants Luke to be, to worship him and be his best friend apparently. And Luke's like, "Oh no, son!"
No,
and now the Beast has nobody because everybody's been burned alive or killed in some way or another.
Yeah, so they both wind up alone at the end.
Yeah, and they could have been best friends forever.
Could have been buddies.
You know. But anyway, you just see Luke walking away, and that's the end of it.
Yep.
So this movie, in my opinion, is a fantastic movie. Because of the full core portion of it, definitely. And it makes you think. It makes you appreciate the friends that you have and know that you shouldn't take anybody for granted.
Right.
That's really the moral of this story. And you should stand up for your friends and not be such a wimp and stand. I mean, I know anybody wants to hide. You know, nobody wants to die, obviously. Right. But here, Luke fought for his life through the rest of the entire movie. And he could have just as easily died in the liquor store and saved his friend's life.
Right.
And he didn't do that. The effects for this movie are amazing. That beast is fucking nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy looking. I love the creature design for this.
Yeah. We were analyzing it earlier because it's so dark in the movie. And I'll put a picture up here. And he's a combination of people and an elk.
Yeah.
And it's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
It just kind of reminds me of something like from The Thing, you know, that weird combo.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie hits a real sweet spot for me because I love folk horror and I also love creature features, and this movie is kind of both in a way.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate that there's some emotional depth to the movie. And as far as the plot's concerned, you know, a lot of times with horror, you don't always get that.
No.
You know, but this
you just want everybody to die.
Exactly. But this one is actually very affecting, and you feel for what's going on and for Luke's plight as far as his guilt and things like that.
Yeah.
I also appreciated that there's actual, even though they took liberties, there's a basis in real Norse mythology for this movie as far as for the creature and its origins and things like that. They used real runic symbols. You know, so I appreciated that they didn't just, as we said with Lord of Misrule, didn't just kind of just totally make something up, you know.
Yeah, just whatever.
You know, exactly. I appreciated that. You know, I appreciate mythology, legends, things like that. So I thought that was really cool too. Overall, I agree with Krista. I think this is a great movie.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that we are referencing, Josh knows a lot about all this mythology stuff. It was never my bag. But also there was an article from Screen Rant, which I will put up in the description, and it's basically the cliff notes to how this movie compares to the Norse mythology and all that fun stuff. So I thank you for those folks because, like I said, I'm lost on all of this stuff. I know of Loki and Odin. That's the names I know. Probably mostly because of Marvel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, when I started listening to Scandinavian bands, I wanted to know what the hell they were talking about.
Yeah.
So that's why I started kind of researching Norse mythology, and of course now I remember a little bit of it.
And I didn't care because you can't understand what the hell they're saying anyway in black metal. So anyway, but yeah, you know, I think it's a good movie. It's dark. It's quick though. It's not a long movie. It's to the point. You get the best of both worlds of gore and folk horror and everything all in one package, plus a great backstory.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I think that's it for this. We want to know what you think of this movie. Have you seen it? Have you watched it? If you haven't, you should, because it's on Netflix and it's easily available to see. And we still would like any sort of recommendations of what we should watch. And go back and watch last week's video.
Yeah.
Because it's not getting a lot of love, and I don't appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Keepers need some love.
Yes, it's a great movie, and you should watch the video that we made for it. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's it until next week. So please like and subscribe, share, all those fun things, comment, whatever. You know, let us know how things are going. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye!